Okay, it's time for another edition of On the Line, and this one I'm pretty excited for because if you're a football nerd like we are here at Vikings.com, you're going to talk to someone else who really loves football, and he is Mike Pereira, former Vice President of Officiating for the National Football League, currently a Rules Analyst for Fox Sports. Not many people who know the game better or have been around the game longer than Mike Pereira. He is on the line with us right now. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Good morning. The only part about that introduction that I didn't like was there's not many that have been around the game long. I'm old, but come on, I'm not that old. There probably are two or three people that have been around the game longer.
Maybe there are, and maybe even in this building, some people who you might know in this building. I'm sure you've developed some relationships with some folks in our building over the years, haven't you, Mike?
Oh, of course I have. I was involved in the league office for 12 years, so I was basically head of officiating in the league office, and then I officiated for 2 years on the field. So if you take my 14 total years and then consider the fact that I was involved in officiating, probably nobody in your office liked me, but because officiating seems to be just a necessity and takes a lot of heat. But yeah, it was always fun dealing with the Vikings.
Well, good. And, I do, over the years, when you go to enough press conferences on Monday mornings, Mike, of your head coach the day after the game, you go to enough of those, which I've been able to do over the years. This is my 15th season coming up with the Vikings. You hear the coach mention or reference a phone call that he had that morning with the league. And I'm sure you've been on the receiving end of some of those phone calls. Any cool stories or any phone call in particular you remember over the years where either you got an earful from someone or you had a really interesting discussion with someone about a game the previous day?
Well, I mean, I had them every week. As Bill Belichick one time told me, he said, I looked at you and I realized one thing. You never win, do you? And I go, no, actually, that's a pretty deep comment, but you're right. I always end up having to deal, if it's a full set of games, I got to deal with 16 losers. That's just the nature of the beast. And I think that officiating has become more and more of a topic and has become easier and easier to blame. And so the calls certainly were frequent. The most interesting thing to me was how they progressed from basically Tuesday calls when I first started with the league to Monday calls to Sunday night calls. Mm-hmm. And then, incredibly in one instance with Jim Mora Jr., a halftime call on a Sunday game when he was upset about a couple calls in the first half. And he's at halftime of his game in Seattle, and I'm eating a piece of cold pizza in my office in New York, and he's chewing on me then. Yeah. So it was an interesting time, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I know it gets heated on the sideline between the officials on the field, and coaches at times, and I was just chuckling to myself at the end of our offseason program. The Vikings had some of the NFL's officials here doing practice, and we had Clete Blakeman here, actually. And, mm-hmm. Zim and Clete were chumming it up, in between the practice fields during a minicamp practice. And I'm just like, what a contrast watching those guys right now compared to what it could be on some Sunday afternoon in November. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, do I ever. I mean, how about this? I went to the Pro Bowl toward the end of my career as the head of officiating, and of course they have special rules there, and so we'd have rules monitors on the sideline with each head coach of the AFC, NFC teams, and I was on the sideline, and so I had John Harbaugh in the AFC, and he chummed it up with me for the first three quarters, and I must admit we were having a ball. And he was saying, this makes me think I want somebody like you on our sideline. I can talk to you, and if I have questions. And he said, we want to hire you after you leave the NFL. And so we were having a great time. We were laughing, and then the official missed an offside call in the fourth quarter. When the game was kind of on the line. This is the Pro Bowl. And he started yelling at the official. And I went to him and said, John, settle down. And he knocked my arms off me and said, don't touch me, and started screaming at me. And I said, boy, how things change when the real thing is on the line. But,
yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, the emotions, they get heated there. That's okay. And you know what?
I understand that.
Yep.
You know.
And the officials do a great job of keeping their cool because they can't have that outburst, right? You know, so that's
they can't. But
right.
And as I get older and crankier, I wish they could. You know,
well,
I mean, it's amazing to me just to watch how, you know, coaches just go off on another human being who's trying to do his best and in an impossible situation, quite frankly. And I think at times it goes over the line, and it is a reflection on why we have such a shortage of officials around the country and why we have to play high school football games on Thursday night because there's not enough officials, you know, to cover all the teams for Friday night games. We're in a dilemma now when it comes to officiating. In fact, on the amateur level, not having enough, and sportsmanship is the big reason why people are not signing up to officiate.
I'm going to ask you about the defensive and offensive pass interference changes and the review process. But before I do that, out of respect for all the other things that owners, competition committee, and officials and the Players Association are worrying about and working on, are there any other tweaks or changes, Mike, to the rules that are going to happen for 2019 that aren't getting talked about very much, but you think are important? And they're not getting talked about because everyone's focusing on the pass interference, but you feel they're important for 2019.
You know, there's a number of them, but a lot of them, you know, are really kind of penalty enforcement things that nobody would really recognize.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the one thing that I am happy about is that they made the kickoff, the rule that was a one-year experiment about all the changes that were made within the kickoff. You know, they made that permanent, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is great because I, for one, did not want to see the kickoff go away. It eliminated, you know, the possibility of the great play and the big play, the kickoff return of 100 yards, and the onside kick would have gone from an onside kick to one play, 4th and 15 from somewhere. It almost changes the game to be a gimmick type, but that becomes a gimmick type play. So I'm really happy that they did that. Some of the other things, the player safety issues in terms of blindside blocks, where you now are going to have to basically shield on that blindside block and push and get in front without taking the big, what they used to call decleater, going to have an effect. But I think the players can learn that. I mean, and this league is all about player safety. It has been for the last couple of decades, which I think is a good thing. And so there's that rule change that has been made. I personally am glad that they stayed put on overtime. I know with the Kansas City New England game, there was all the chatter about, both teams should be guaranteed to get the ball, even if the first team scores a touchdown. I don't buy it. I mean, the league, and I do too, I like the element of sudden death. And the only way to have sudden death is to have it to where if you score a touchdown on the first drive, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's an element to me that says, why are we glorifying the offense? Let's make a team play defense. And in fact, if the defense in the first drive holds the offense, then that team then has a great advantage going into the second possession, because now they know what they have to do to tie or win. So, to me, I'm glad that didn't change. But the focus is definitely going to be on the instant replay, which continues to grow, and pass interference.
Yeah, and so that's a good segue to what fans are going to notice, and what we're going to talk about in 2019 is now pass interference. Both DPI and OPI are reviewable plays for coaches, before the 2-minute mark and for the booth after the 2-minute mark. So, Mike, what was your viewpoint on all of that? And I know there have been some late tweaks regarding the Hail Mary as well. So where do you think we stand on that, and what do you expect for 2019?
Well, I don't know what to expect for 2019, and I'm not sure that we will know until the 64 games of the preseason have been completed. Mm-hmm. And it won't be the first time that a rule is adjusted, or the way that you officiate a play is adjusted after the preseason. And so to me, there's some hope that some sanity can come out of this decision that was made, which to me was an overreaction to one play in the championship game in New Orleans with the Rams.
Right.
I really believe that they have opened up a can of worms here by making pass interference reviewable and putting coaches, having to treat it the same way, having to challenge a play outside of 2 minutes of the game in the first half, outside of 2 minutes of the second quarter, and outside of 2 minutes of the fourth, and any time in overtime. But coaches are going to have to challenge something that's difficult to see. And while it's easy, everybody talks about, how do you correct that error that was made in New Orleans? Well, that's easy. This fixes that. I get that. But this opens up a can of worms to me specifically about offensive pass interference, because that happens so many times and it goes uncalled. It could be a swing pass and the slot receiver is 1 1/2 yards downfield before
blocking.
The ball is touched. Yeah. And so technically it's offensive pass interference.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate your time, but I got one more thing that I want to make sure we get in because it's a pretty cool foundation and organization that you're a part of, Mike. And I know you guys just had your golf tournament to help raise money for it. Battlefields to Ball Fields. Tell the folks about it a little bit.
Yeah, there's such a shortage of officials, and also there's a constant need to find things to help our veterans get acclimated back into their communities when they come home. And so we put together a foundation that basically gives scholarships to veterans and to active members of our armed services, our armed forces. And we basically get them involved in officiating in their community. We buy their uniforms, pay all their dues, do any cost associated with officiating. We pick up the tab. It's called Battlefields to Ball Fields, the number 2. And it's really cool because we've had over 200 scholarships given out, and we're putting men and women, we're putting them on the pitches, on the fields, on the courts, and we're letting them use their skills that they had when they were, on the, in battle or in any part of the service, their skills of courage and concentration and communication and goals and missions. We're letting them use those skills to serve again. And it's been very cool. We need more officials. We need quality of people signing up to officiate. And we need to do more for our veterans. And so it's been a very cool program. And anybody that's interested to know a little bit more about it, the web address is you go online at battlefields and the number 2 ballfields.org, and you can read more about the foundation.
Awesome. We'll put that information up on the screen as well, so folks can go and check that out. It's a pretty cool organization. And you're pretty cool for taking so much time with us, Mike. We really appreciate it. I'm sure Vikings fans got a lot of information from you, and we promise we will call you and message you again, but it will never be on a Monday morning after a loss yelling at you. I promise.
I'm glad to hear that. You may change your mind, though, so I don't want you to say never.
Okay,
so
all right, fine. I pledge to never do that. How about that?
There you go.
All right.
There you go.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Enjoy the rest of the summer, and we'll run into you down the line, I'm sure, this fall.
You got it.
All right.
Thanks.